Hey, Pat Rigsby and Doug Spurling here with another episode of the Wealthy Gym Owners. And today, man, we've got a great topic because Doug is getting back in the gym ownership game. So we're going to really do a deep dive and just talk about the thought process, the plan, everything that goes into it. So welcome, Doug.
Yeah, not the topic we had brainstormed a couple weeks ago to talk about it, but excited to unpack the last couple weeks as this has come to fruition.
So, I mean, you sold the original Spurling Fitness back in mid 2024 and focused most of your efforts on the short-term real estate side of things and then the coaching work that we're doing together. Not to mention that you're a dad for, so you got some other things on your plate. But so just talk us through a little bit of kind of what piqued your interest in getting back into this before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I think from an interest perspective, I had a 12-year runway of kind of walking the walk. And I think the interest certainly started with, to be clear, to give him credit, it certainly started with Josh, who bought the Kenny Monk location from me. For those that don't know, I think we did another episode on that solely, but he was a 12-year employee of mine that bought the first location. And just kind of looking at his plans and my plans and having some continued kind of proof of concept of what we're teaching is working. I mean, we see that with our gym owners that we have in our coaching programs, what we teach works. But I think I wanted, after the decompressing of the sale, right? So basically the rest of 24 was kind of just decompressing, moving into the almost 100% into the coaching world. It certainly piqued the interest when he came to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about a second location?" There's certainly a lot of things we'll unpack that we're going to do differently, but there's part of me that feels better about having kind of this, I guess I'm calling it like a lab or a case study where I can feel comfortable testing my own dollars and my own time before having others try newer things, right? There's kind of core components that will always work in business, but for some of the newer stuff, and then just entrepreneurship and higher ceilings and always wanting to build something. It was intriguing about the opportunity to build something new.
Well, so you're getting back into it, and I mean, I think I've grown to understand a little bit of the behind the scenes, what's happening. But I mean, what's this process going to look like? Just kind of when are you expecting to secure a spot and get things kind of, I mean, I know they're in motion now, but get things more into boots on the ground type of setting?
Yeah. So the first thing I did after Josh and I decided, hey, like this is the direction we want to go. I mean, I looked at the financial side first, for sure. I think that's something that fortunately we're going to be able to do differently this time around. When I started location one in 2012, I had no money, no funding, no nothing. It was all just dad's credit card for 10 grand and some Craigslist equipment to start things. And so this time around, we're fortunate that I can upfront capitalize the startup of it from a standpoint of build out the layout that we want, build out the equipment selection that we want, pick the location that we want. Those would be the top things that we're starting with. So looking at kind of the money side, it was building out, okay, number one is what's the layout that we're going to want to have to run the model that we're going to have. And I think that's probably where I am excited to test the like pure single model. We grew into a single model. When I started the gym in 2012, I mean, I just saw it on my Facebook memories the other day. When I was promoting the gym back then, we had like upteen different classes, right? Class called this, class called TRX, class called kettlebells, all these different offerings, personal training, semi-private, large group, etc. And now we're going to double down exclusively on the small group model. And so the layout and the equipment that we need for that has evolved and is certainly different than what we kind of just built as we went with the first location. So getting equipment secured, putting bids out for equipment quotes, flooring quotes, which as you all know, flooring is sometimes more expensive than the equipment or just as expensive. And then certainly looking at the real estate and the spaces available, picking location, And then just looking at the overall budget of how many clients we're going to need to break even, I think is certainly where we're starting.
So I know a little bit of this, you're kind of keeping close to the vest at the moment, but you know what? Like if you're going to pick out one, two, three things that you would do differently from the first one that you can share, what would those be?
I mean, I think the one to look at like the singular model, right? Just to unpack that a little bit more, we're looking at running a single model with a very lean staff, right? For those that don't know, when I had Spurling Fitness at peak, we had 8 or 9 trainers, a couple different admins, a general manager. Like in the training gym world, it was a good sized team. And there's many perks to that for sure. But, you know, you're certainly dealing with a lot more people problems. There's a lot more kind of, I don't want to call them headaches because they're serving your business, but staff comes with their own problems and their own issues to solve. And so looking at a little bit more of a leaner operation this time around with just running off of ideally 2 coaches rather than 8 or 10 is going to be a little bit more, a large shift in the model to run a lean staff model. And that I think will be interesting from a culture standpoint. That is one thing that I'm curious on is when you have 5, 6, 7, 8 people that are bumping shoulders every day in your gym as a staff, you build a pretty good team. Because if you don't like this person, you might like this person, and you might connect with this person better than another coworker. And so I think the team is pretty interesting to me. Only here going to have, like I said, two coaches. They really got to like each other because they're going to be working side by side. And so there's the team culture piece of it. The singular model piece of it, I think, is another interesting one. And then I would say the thing that I didn't get to do because I just didn't know how to do it, didn't even know it was an option, is kind of a grand opening pre-sale, like that part of it. I mean, like many of you, when I first started the gym, I knew nothing about marketing. I was a trainer. I just grew into love the business and the marketing side after a couple of years of running the gym. But now it's kind of the opposite. Like I have spent 0 time thinking about programming or the workouts. Like that's all Josh. And frankly, he's probably not spending that much time on it because it's already built out. But we know that largely once you've matured as a gym owner, like that's frankly the simpler and easier part. The harder part is how do you get people through the door? And so I think the marketing is going to look not necessarily different than how it looked when I sold, but certainly a lot different than when I first launched it. So I'm interested to see the growth curve compared to our growth curve when we first started location 1 12 years ago.
So you've got a pretty solid idea of what this model is going to look like, the size facility that you want. So having owned, I mean, I remember when we had 2 locations and they were 2 hours away from one another. How far out do you think you want to go from where you guys are currently located for this first kind of newer model?
Yeah, so that was a decision that Josh made. I mean, frankly, I'd go anywhere because for clarity, my role is simply going to be marketing and strategy. I won't be involved like in the gym physically. And so Josh set a rule that he doesn't want to have to go more than 30 minutes from location 1. So within 30 minutes, something that I'm open about that I think is important if you are considering either relocating your location or potentially opening up other locations is I do think there's a strong opportunity in the industry for these kind of like, I guess you'd call it like a tier 2 market, right? Because you don't have, like, we understand the challenges of going into, for example, the town that I went into, 12,000 people, very small, comes with lots of benefits as far as everybody knows who you are, but can also come with lots of problems. And I'm certainly, I think, aware that eventually you probably have a lower cap in a market like that. Versus a tier 1, like, so if we say, let's call that tier 3. Tier 1 is like the cities, right? The Bostons, the Austins, LAs, the San Diegos, the bigger, let's call them 6-figure plus, multiple 6-figure populations. As those are going to be uber competitive, right? You're going to have every franchise there. You're going to have multiple service offerings, all basically to the consumer doing the same thing. And then that middle tier two is interesting if you can find these pockets throughout the country where there's enough population, there's enough income, but I'm not going to say no competition because I certainly think that's a marker for having maybe a little bit more of a risk on this one. I think I would not want to go into a town that like doesn't have a gym at all, like a complete rural. But that tier two is an interesting from a location standpoint to look at.
I remember, gosh, it's been quite some time ago, but I even reached out and did some marketing to try to attract people who were in markets between 20 and 100,000 people, because both of my locations fell into that. One was about a market about 25,000, and then one was just a tick over 50,000. And having grown up in a market that fell into that was a real comfort zone for me at the time. It's like a lot of the things that drove Spurling Fitness, the ability to kind of get your foot in the door about anywhere, not as much pursuit from what would now be the Orange Theories of the world or all the brands that Exponential has, but enough population that, I mean, you can do some things and gain some ground. So I think that's exciting. I think that a lot of people kind of maybe skip over that opportunity because everybody gets caught up in kind of the shiny object, which would be tier one markets, class A real estate. And it's not that those things aren't good. It's just that you're certainly not going to be the one finding value where others don't if you go there. So I'm really excited, curious about this.
For sure. And I think the other thing I would say in regards to location and facility size is when I started looking for space in 2011, 2012, there was like one or two options in town, right? And so the only option was this complete hole in the wall, and it was a 1930s old dusty warehouse. And so that will be an interesting, I think we had a couple of years of an uphill climb to just, even though it was a small town, I think it was less about location and more about like reputation and kind of perspective from the outside. Like, is that a legit operation? Is that professional? Is that accept those kind of concerns versus opening with an existing brand? I think that will be very curious to see. The other thing that you mentioned that I would kind of unpack there is I'm very interested to see from a marketing perspective. We're obviously very big on things like email and digital ads, but I'm also just as big on kind of the grassroots stuff and the business visits, the fish bowls, all that stuff we talk about. And in a town where A, I'm not going to live, and B, I'm not really visiting on a regular basis, nor is Josh, to be clear, that those strategies I'm interested because we're going to still implement those strategies with the head coach. And that will be interesting how successful that is compared to there was in Kennebunk, there was a 99% chance if I walked into the business that the owner either knew me or knew of me because of I lived in the town and the size of the town.
Yeah, I kind of had the polar opposite experience, right? Like the first gym, I mean, I committed to a space the second time I was in the town. The second location, I mean, I live 2 hours away from. And the disadvantages come with not really knowing people, but the advantage is you kind of get to, I mean, for lack of a more eloquent way of putting it, kind of play dumb and just say, hey, we're the new people in town. And it's a good opportunity to get your foot in the door, I think. So it'll be fun to watch that in practice again. So when do you anticipate being able to share a little bit more? And I should say, as we're recording this is early January now, and I don't want to let any of the cat out of the bag on any of this stuff. So kind of what's the timeline roughly in your eyes to be able to do things, and then you're kind of teaching what you're building?
That's something I'm very excited about, is to kind of, for our coaching clients, share exactly what I'm doing each week. And as we mentioned in the beginning, like this isn't my only thing. So I'm pretty fortunate to have Josh that I'll be pretty heavy on the initial launch, but I'm fortunate to have him and run the day to day. So I'm aware of the maybe privilege of that statement. But as far as the time frame goes, we're, like I said earlier, we're probably, I would say, about 3 months out is what I'm kind of thinking. So that's probably going to be about a month of site selection and negotiations. We have offers out to a spot right now. We're fortunate enough that we're looking at buying the location, and with my interest in real estate, that certainly fits both sides of my passions. So we're looking at buying a space, and there's build out, of course. Again, like I painted some walls and threw some flooring down at location one. We're gonna probably do some. We are going to do a lot, and I sort of a build out this time around. So I envision them there being over the next 2 months, securing a spot and then building that spot out. On the back end, we'll be doing layout, equipment, and then obviously recruiting those 2 staff members. So we're going to be starting with those 2 staff members right away. So we're in the trying to attract and recruit and interview and all that fun stuff. So that will certainly take a month or 2, but I would envision by April-ish that we should be up and running. I'm also very much a fan of the ready, fire, aim approach. So as much as I want it to look nice and be ready for a good first impression, I also want to get it up and running. And I think the runway of that for me is going to be as short as possible while still keeping quality high.
Well, I'm excited to see this from an observation from a fan standpoint, but then also, I mean, I think it's a unique opportunity for the coaching work that we do to have people kind of potentially build alongside what you guys are doing. And it probably feels for the person building alongside, like, okay, you know what, I can do this. It's almost like a follow along workout, right? It's not just, oh, here's this module. It's like, no, this is what I could do. And whether I'm starting from scratch or kind of rebooting things, I can build and have the same pace and the same feel like I'm experiencing the same challenges. And so I think that'll be a really exciting possibility for some people who may have had aspirations of building a $500,000 a year plus facility, but never could really connect the dots. I think this is something where the look over the shoulder approach can carry a lot of weight.
For sure. And the last thing I might end with is kind of unrelated to the second location specifically, but just the idea of like plans aren't set in stone, and what you thought you were going to do is not. Like, things change very quickly, and I think you have to be open to that. So if you followed me for a long time, basically for the entire 12 years I owned the gym, I was very clear that I did not want a second location, and I did not want multiple locations. And I think that's a maturity that came from one, like very much the who not how strategy of like, Josh is a phenomenal operator, like the best operator I've ever encountered. And we complement each other very well. And so he doesn't want to take the risk of opening up a second location by himself. He doesn't have the financials to start a second location by himself. But I don't want to operate a second location. Like that was that. I'm still very clear on that. Like, I don't want to be in the gym operating. And so I think if you asked me even a year ago, if I was even before the sale, even before I even thought of selling location one, if I was going to open up a second location, there would have been no chance. And so I think just the idea of like life in general, but specifically with business, just being open to plans changing and opportunities may come about that you may think you would never say yes to, but if it fits the lifestyle that you're looking for, because I think looking back, that was my fear, is we've seen a lot of folks with 2 locations that they're just running around like a chicken with their head cut off time wise. And so if I can remove that and focus on my strengths, which is the marketing piece and the kind of strategy piece, I think it certainly fits the bill. So just being open to your 5-year vision or your 3-year vision is certainly open to change, and be flexible on that.
I like it. Well, we'll certainly continue to revisit this in the podcast. And then for people who want to do a deeper dive and kind of build alongside, there'll be opportunities with the coaching work we do together. So, Doug, thanks for sharing and pulling back the curtain on some of this. And guys, we'll talk to you in the next episode of the Wealthy